Good morning. I'm Dave Christie with your LaRouche Organization update for Thursday, July 3rd. So tomorrow we celebrate the 249th celebration of our independence from the evils of the Anglo-Dutch imperial system, the British Empire. And today I'd like to focus on a certain aspect of that is often forgotten. That is the economic model that Alexander Hamilton set into motion, which was a crucial component of securing that revolution, and is frankly one of the key issues, if not the key issue, that has to be resolved today. Now, I mention this in light of what Helga Zepp-LaRouche had done on her weekly webcast, where she warned that the underlying tensions that we see globally, that what underlies all of that is the collapse of the transatlantic system, which she referred to as a time bomb. You should watch that presentation by Helga. I'll cover certain aspects of what she said in that, but I think it's important to reflect on what Hamilton actually did to secure this republic, not only creating the national bank, which was to serve the interests of directing credit for productive enterprises, large-scale infrastructure, and so forth, but Hamilton also created the commercial banking system that would facilitate the aims of the entrepreneurs and the private sector to have a kind of harmony of interests between the private sector and the government. And for his role in that, Hamilton, of course, suffered his death at the hands of Aaron Burr, who, of course, fled the United States and went to London. He stayed with Jeremy Bentham, one of the key collaborators of Lord Shelburne, who both of them were involved in the British East India Company, which is in fact what we fought the American Revolution against. Just to make a brief point on that, from the time of the Boston Massacre till the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the British East India Company was involved in a forced famine in India, resulting in the deaths of somewhere near 20 to 30 million people, while the Indians starved and the British shipped off key resources and agricultural products and so forth for their global imperial system. Okay, now I think given the nature of the collapse unfolding, which has not stopped since 2007, 2008, it's only been propped up by the bailout system that we've seen since that point, which is really to prop up the derivatives cancer that is said to be in the range of $2 quadrillion. That's 2,000 trillion for those not familiar with the term quadrillion. Anyway, but what yesterday in her webcast, Helga Zepp-LaRouche focused on this transatlantic collapse and the growing power of the new system that threatens the oligarchical financial interests that want to maintain their hegemonic power. But she said that the collapse is fueling the global instability and war, which she described as the real bomb. After following her brief overview of the positions of global instability, whether that's the Israel-Iran conflict still unresolved, which of course Israel has nuclear weapons, the Pakistan-India recent tensions, again, armed nations, and of course the ongoing NATO-Russia proxy war on the battlefields of Ukraine. But again, Helga referred to the financial collapse as the real bomb, and she focused on her husband's forecast following the 1971 decision under the Nixon administration, which pulled the plug on the Bretton Woods system. That was to end the fixed exchange rate system, begin the floating of the dollar, and basically turning the dollar into a speculative play toy for the City of London including it became referred to as the petrodollar. That was the financing mechanism for a lot of the geopolitical games, using terrorist proxies like the Mujahideen to fight against the Soviets. Much of this was involved in the whole tensions, including Iran at that time, all designed for the larger geopolitical games against the Soviet Union. Anyway, Helga reminded people in her webcast that following LaRouche's forecast of the end of the Bretton Woods system, the decoupling of the dollar going off the fixed exchange rate, she said that Lynn, with prophetic accuracy, said what the consequences would be. She said, "He is on the record saying, if you continue on that course, you will end up in a new depression, a new fascism, and the danger of a new world war." And that is exactly where we are today. Now, just to clarify, especially for those who know the evils of the IMF and World Bank that were part of the Bretton Woods, came out of the Bretton Woods Conference and so-called system, that from the beginning, there was a different intent as designed or intended by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who wanted the IMF and the World Bank, as well as the United Nations, to play the role of ending the colonial system and providing the ability for nations to develop. That was his idea of the Bretton Woods system, the IMF and the World Bank. Now, and I think that, his intent for this decolonialization after World War II, should recall that what Roosevelt was reported to have said by his son Elliot in his father's fights with Winston Churchill, basically telling Churchill, look, we're not fighting a war against fascist economic slavery so that you can keep your colonial slavery going. And Roosevelt intended that what he had shown the success of the American system in pulling the U.S. out of its depression, that could be adopted by nations internationally that were coming out of that were to be coming out of the colonial policy. And, under Roosevelt, we had the directed credit for the large-scale infrastructure. Much of, the dams that we still rely upon on energy for today were done under this kind of program. But the other part of what Roosevelt had done was to create, in line with Hamilton's design, which actually Roosevelt's grandfather, Isaac Roosevelt, actually worked with Hamilton. That's another story. But the other part of what Roosevelt did was to ensure that we had a functional commercial banking system. And Glass-Steagall was one of the key elements of that. Now, what that did is it separated the regulated commercial banking system from the speculative side of Wall Street, both the investment houses and the insurance houses. And under Glass-Steagall, the FDIC was created to ensure confidence in the commercial banks. So, deposits were guaranteed up to a certain amount. But that was and those banks were regulated to ensure that they provided credit for, the productive part of the economy. Now, when the key provisions of Glass-Steagall were repealed in 1999 under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley, they tore down the firewall between the commercial banks and the investment and insurance side of Wall Street, thus creating the so-called universal banking model, where all of that could be kept under the same umbrella. However, they didn't repeal the FDIC component of the Glass-Steagall Act. Therefore, when Wall Street ran its whole speculative operation following the repeal of Glass-Steagall in '99, they began the creation of this mortgage bubble operation and using mortgages to fuel the exotic financial instruments, mortgage-backed securities, and so on, as people probably recall. But when that blew out, FDIC did not have the funds to cover that, and therefore Wall Street walked up to Congress with its gun to its head and said, give us this bailout, otherwise the entire financial system collapses. Now, nothing has changed since that point. Congress has not changed anything. Wall Street has not changed its activities. It's only accelerated into the so-called everything bubble, where everything from car loans, commercial real estate, to student loans, it's all the same type of exotic financial instruments being leveraged or backstopped by these loans and so forth. So we are, again, the collapse is only getting, the next phase of the collapse is only going to be worse. So reinstating Glass-Steagall was one of the key components of LaRouche's 4 laws. You can find that on the LaRouche organization site. That ensures, again, the Glass-Steagall Act, as Mr. LaRouche called for, creates a functional banking system, but it has to be part of the directed credit for upgrading our infrastructure platforms, and all of that driven by the science driver of fusion and so forth. So you can get that document. But this is how we secure the American Revolution once again and our sovereignty. However, as Helga stressed yesterday in her webcast, we need a new international and development system. She has repeated this ever since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, where all the economic and security needs of each and every country, those have to be taken into account if humanity is going to survive this current global crisis and end the disease of geopolitics. All right, now I'm not going to cover some of the developments. I just wanted to, I think it's important to just stress what is needed to actually secure the American Revolution. We do, of course, have the ongoing negotiations around the situation in Gaza. That's unresolved. We have tensions in Azerbaijan that are sparking up, certainly fueled by the British intent to use the soft underbelly of the Southwest Asia as the battering ram against Russia. This is the same tired game. So there's a lot that is in flux, but I think it is upon us to take the necessary to focus again on that spirit of the American Revolution, particularly what Hamilton did on the economic and banking side of things, which was a key component of securing the American Revolution and must again be done today. So join us on the streets tomorrow. Well, today and tomorrow, we will be celebrating our Independence Day by distributing the leaflet that you can find, Will There Be Fireworks, on the thermonuclear fireworks on the 4th of on our Independence Day. You can find that leaflet on the site. So join us on the streets to truly celebrate our Independence Day.